Hi guys, welcome to Sine, Cosine Rule and Area of Triangle. So I'm going to do, and obviously we did a video on trigonometry, and that was right angle triangles, and this is non-right angle triangles. So what do we have to do when we work out the sine? So when to use the sine rule, when we know how to use the sine rule, is when you're finding an angle or you're finding a side of a non-right angle triangle. Okay. There is the formula, which is A over sine A and B over sine B, which is equal to C over sine B, and that's to find out a side. And the other one is the other way around when you're trying to work out the angle. Okay, these are given onto the formula sheet, so you don't have to remember them. So that's a quick heads up. So when to use the sine rule, when you've got two angles and a side. The side can be anywhere, okay? But you've got two angles and a side, and then also if you've got two sides and a non-included angle, okay? So an angle not between the two sides. So you've got two sides and not an angle not in between both of them, okay? So you've got two sides and you've got an angle, okay? That's when you use the sine rule, okay? So let's have a look at an example of the sine rule, okay? So before I do that, obviously I want to just have a look at when to use the sine rule. So again, you've got the formula, so you've got a squared is equal to b squared is plus c squared minus 2bc because of a. Again, this is given onto the formula sheet, so you don't need to remember it. So when to use the cosine rule, when you've got three sides, okay, or when you've got two sides and an angle included in the middle, okay. That is when you use the cosine rule. So sine rule a bit different, cosine a bit different, okay. When you've got three sides, you look for an angle, and when you've got two sides, you find it, and an angle you find in a side. So let's have a look at an example of the sine rule. So we are trying to work out the angle x in this example, okay. So you might want to pause the video here, and you might want to try to do it yourselves, but I will run through it briefly. So we have two sides and a non-included angle. So we've got two sides and we've got a non-included angle, okay? And we are trying to work out angle x. So first of all, we've got to work out angle f, okay? Which will give me sine of f over 5, which gives me sine of 80 over 9, which then I multiply by 5, and I get sine of f is 5 multiplied by sine of 80, which gives me sine of -1, which gives me f as the final answer as 33.2, because you do the sin -1 of that answer. Okay, you can obviously then work out what x is by doing 180 minus 80 minus 33.2. But remember, you've got two sides and an angle, okay, but we were trying to work out the angle, the other angle, okay. So gives me 66.8 to that question. Okay, let's have a look at the next question. So this is an example of a sine rule and using a cosine rule in two. And the exam kind of board likes to do is try to do this a bit where they try to implement both into one question. So let's have a look at this one. So we have two sides and an angle in the middle. So we could be able to work out the x first. So we could work out the missing side, and let's call that x, okay, because that will help us using the cosine rule. So we could do x squared is equal to 5 squared plus 6 squared minus 2 multiplied by 5 multiplied by 6 multiplied by cos 20, and that gives me an answer of 4.61844, which we square root that answer and it gives me an answer of 2.149. So we're going to x is that. Now we have got to use the sine rule to work out what z is, okay. So we do sine of z is over 6 is equal to sine of 20 over 2.149, what we've just worked out. You write sine of z is 6 multiplied our previous answer, which is sine of -1, because we're trying to work out the angle, and that gives me 72.7 degrees, okay. And that is a combination of the cosine rule and the sine rule, okay. So they've kind of put two of them in one question, okay. So you've got to be able to tell, right? So it's perhaps best writing those notes at the beginning and remember. Right, the lastly is an area of a triangle. So this is to work out an area of a non-right triangle, and you need, and it's half AB sine C. Okay, so let's have a look at an example. Again, you've got to perhaps label our size. So you've got little a, that's big A, that would be little a. Okay, that's big B, that would be B, and that's big C, that would be C. Okay, so find the area of the triangle. It's half AB sine C. So you write half multiplied by 7.3 multiplied by B, which is 5 multiplied by sine 37. Area gives me 12.74, which is 12.7 centimeters squared